Okay, I'm back. Sorry for the delay.
Cool. Is anyone not ready? Okay, then. My time begins now. We affirm contention one is access. The current healthcare system is broken. Newkirk 18 finds that 90% of all people still pay deductibles of up to $2,600 per family, amounts that are often difficult to afford even for middle-class families, which is why the U.S. Census Bureau explains that in 2017, 28.5 million people did not have health care or health insurance at any point during the year. Thus, Rediger 16 corroborates that health systems like that of the United States impede access to care. Affirming solves because a single-payer system means that people no longer forego care due to high costs. The impacts are twofold. First, as Baxter 2020 explains, a universal healthcare system would save 68,000 lives annually by ensuring access to care for all Americans. Second is poverty. Newkirk finds that in the status quo, medical expenses push millions of Americans below the federal poverty line, including 7 million people who make more than 150% of the poverty level. 4 million of those Americans are pushed into the ranks of extreme poverty. Contention 2 is rural hospitals. Archer 2020 finds that more than 120 rural hospitals have closed since 2010. Another 453, almost 1 in 4, are at risk of failing. Archer furthers that 46 million rural residents, 1 in 6 Americans, have far poorer health outcomes and lower life expectancies than Americans living in urban areas. Medicare for All would solve this issue in a few ways. First is through compensating care. UBANet 2020 explains that around 51% of rural hospitals and about 45% of all hospitals serve a disproportionate share of patients who lack adequate coverage, and those hospitals are forced to take on the cost of that uncompensated care. Under Medicare for All, no patient would show up to the emergency room without insurance, and as a result, the incidence of uncompensated care would disappear. Public Citizen 2020 finds that under most private insurers, hospitals are paid on a fee-for-service basis, which hurts hospitals that don't have a consistent flow of patients, like rural hospitals. However, under Medicare for All, global budgeting would ensure that hospitals are paid based on the health needs of their community, as well as emergency and other funds. Eibner 2019 explains that under Medicare for All, the all-payer average rate under the Medicare for All plan in 2019 would be 124% of the current Medicare rates for hospital payments. The impact is lives. Each hospital closure in a rural area sends a community reeling. UNC 2020 explains that people in rural areas of the United States wait on average nearly twice as long for ambulances as those in urban areas. They further that total activation time increased by 9.5 minutes as compared to the year prior to closure. This is extremely frightening, as Wild 2012 explains that a minute increase in response time increases mortality by between 8 and 17%. McCausland 2019 explains that populations served by rural hospitals saw mortality rates rise 5.9% after a single hospital closed. Contention 3 is increasing drug innovation. In the status quo, Big Pharma is gaming the system. Jung 19 of Stat News writes that large pharmaceutical companies did not actually invent most of the drugs they sell. The existence of profitable pharmaceutical manufacturers is dependent on drugs invented by third parties. Light of Stanford corroborates that about 90% of all new drugs provide few or no clinical advantages for patients. Passing Medicare for All puts the emphasis back on innovation through value-based pricing. The Medicare for All bill stipulates that payments to providers may not take into account the profit or net revenue of the provider, or increasing the profit or net revenue of the provider, meaning that the price of drugs needs to be based on clinical value rather than production cost. Value-based pricing is crucial because Keckley of Deloitte writes that in a value-driven healthcare system, pharma companies will need to provide pharmaceuticals that demonstrate real measurable value. Patel 17 corroborates that this may pressure pharmaceutical companies to align their incentives with those of the payers. Productive innovation is critical, as the ITIF finds that pharmaceutical innovation accounted for 73% of the increase in life expectancy in 30 developing and developed countries from 2000 to 2009. All in all, Nushka 15 finds that with innovation, we could avert 10 million deaths every year by 2035. I'll send the cards in case.
Yeah, I'll start my speech after I get the.
Yeah,
I'll let you know when I get it. Okay, I just got it. So I'm good to go. Okay, anyone not ready? We negate. First, an observation. Increased coverage doesn't decrease mortality. Black et al. 2019 finds no discernible mortality effects over a 10-year period. Those with life-threatening but treatable conditions likely sought care even if they were uninsured. With that, contention one is wait times. Medicare for All would reimburse providers at a rate far less than now. Preneur 2019 says the Medicare for All legislation stipulates that healthcare providers will be reimbursed at the rates used by Medicare today, a reduction of 40% from what private insurers pay. This reduces the supply of medical services in two ways. First is hospitals. Abelson 2019 says if Medicare for All abolished private insurance and reduced rates to Medicare levels, some hospitals would close some hospitals, especially struggling rural centers, would close virtually overnight. Others would try to offset the steep cuts by laying off thousands of workers. Second is doctors. Eichhorn and Hutchinson 2019 say the new fee schedule will be significantly lower, which means Medicare for All would lower physician incomes in a significant way. This is really bad because Eichhorn says many experienced doctors would simply leave the profession. If they don't leave, Conover 2019 says physicians deliberately reduce the supply of their services. In Quebec, home visits drop by 63%, telephone consultations by 41%, and physician time spent per office visit by 16%. Because of this, wait times skyrocketed in single-payer systems. Conover 2019 states, rationing by waiting is a persistent feature of both the NHS and Canada's single-payer system. 61% of Americans waited less than 1 month after being advised that they needed surgery. The comparable figures for Canada were 34.8%. The impact is mortality. Wait times can make treating diseases impossible. As Barua et al. 2014 says, the advance of disease during delay can mean increased risk of permanent disability. The advance of disease might be so significant as to render effective treatment no longer possible. Access to a waiting list is not access to healthcare. Patients die as a result of waiting lists. Barcott 2017 quantifies, adjusting for the differences in populations, that translates to an estimated 25,000 additional female deaths each year. Contention two is recipient countries. Price controls via Medicare for All would hurt recipient countries in two ways. Subpoint A is innovation, or biotech. U.S. innovation is thriving. As Jarvis 2020 says, the past 3 years represent drug companies' most productive period in more than 2 decades. The year brought several notable trends. The first was an uptick in the number of novel mechanisms on display in the new drugs. The quality of the drugs over the last decade or so has steadily improved. That's being driven by small firms. As Robinson 2020 says, small pharma companies are overwhelmingly driving innovation, accounting for 63% of all new prescription drug approvals over the past 5 years. Crucially, the BIO finds in 2016, the majority of biotech companies are small private startups heavily reliant on venture capital investment. Unfortunately, Medicare for All's price controls would decrease that investment. Easton 2018 says, if profitability and value creation opportunities for new drugs declined, the appetite of the venture community for risky long-term biopharmaceutical investments would shrink exponentially. This is empirically true, as Dickinson 94 finds. Since January 1993, when the president first intimated that some form of government evaluation of drug prices would be included, investors have been moving away from biotech stocks. The number of biotech initial public offerings fell from 43 in 1992 to 25 in 1993. That's why Nissen 2015 finds biotech companies are heavily reliant on prices staying high. If more sensible pricing takes effect, it could bring those investments crashing down. That cuts off drug flow. As Eager and Malik 2014 say, this measure would reduce the number of new drugs by approximately 75%. The impact is lives. As Sun 2020 says, U.S. pharmaceutical innovation accounted for a 73% increase in life expectancy in recipient countries. Subpoint B is prices. High U.S. prices subsidize the rest of the world. As Fur et al. 2019 finds, one reason that pharmaceutical prices are high is that the U.S. is subsidizing the rest of the world in the development of drugs. Bailey 2018 provides the warrant saying paying for the global cost of research and development for new drugs is made up by charging Americans higher unregulated prices. Lichtenberg 08 furthers price discrimination may make some products profitable to manufacture and sell that otherwise would not be. Price controls through Medicare for All would slash profits. As Sud et al. 08 finds, if the United States implemented price negotiations similar to those found in other developed countries, U.S. revenues would fall by as much as 20%. The impact is providing care. As the AHP says in 2018, lower income countries can often purchase drugs for 1/10 or less of the cost of high income countries. Due to this, McNeil 2019 says, nearly 20 million Africans are on HIV treatment for less than $100 a year. Top quality drugs for malaria, tuberculosis, hepatitis C, and some cancers are sold at rock bottom prices in poor countries. Thus, we affirm. Or negate. Okay, I'll just send case, and then we can do cross. Oh, do you guys actually have? Okay, there's the card appendix. Never mind. So yeah, y'all just let me know when you get it, and then I'm good to start cross whenever.
Let me reload my email. Okay, I got it.
Okay. You can have first question.
Okay. Let's talk about the Jarvis evidence.
Yep.
What does it say a few paragraphs down?
It says that, like, I don't know. I guess you tell me.
A few paragraphs down, it says that innovation is going to go to virtually zero, specifically because of industry consolidation.
Wait, where does it ever say this?
At the bottom of the evidence, you can have a question.
The bottom of the ev that I read?
Yeah,
Like,
Jarvis.
the card that okay. Well, I guess the judges can call for the card later, but yeah, I'll take a question. So this Nushka evidence that you read at the bottom of your case, your impact evidence, this is status quo, right?
We would say no, because it's talking about the future, and it's specific to saying that we have to make actually innovative health investments, which you're not seeing.
It just says with the right investment, and that, like,
exactly. And right health investments is referring specifically to investments that are actually innovative and help us. May I have a question?
Oh, actually, could I have a follow-up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it just says that today's health tools alone won't get us there. Doesn't that just mean that, like, we need to, like, do innovation, right? Like, your card.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why we need to implement value-based pricing in order to actually do innovation.
But your evidence never actually talks about, like, Medicare for all. It's saying that, like, in the current system, we could save that much.
No, it's saying we can make the right investments, which is supposed to be actual innovation. Can I have a question?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about this, like, investment link. What did Trump just pass yesterday?
Okay, so he didn't actually pass anything. I know what you're going to read. The evidence says that it's super, super unlikely that it's ever going to pass, and that
why is it super likely it's going to pass? It's an executive order. He signs it.
Yeah, but the evidence that you're going to read, I mean, the judges can call for it. Like, our team has cut it too. It says that, like, it's that, like, these aren't actually, like, fully fledged price controls, and that it's unlikely that they're actually going to do much. It says it's like a last-ditch effort, and it says that it remains unclear whether the Trump administration is capable of finalizing any of the stuff by election day. So, could I have a question?
Yeah.
So, you're going back to your Nushka evidence. You just need the right investment, right? Can't the right investment happen in the status quo too?
We're saying specifically right now these companies don't have an incentive to actually do the right investments. They're currently doing profit-based, not actually innovative-based investments, which is why we say you need to implement value-based pricing to actually achieve this effect.
So is your evidence about big pharma then?
Our evidence is about, like, pharma in general.
Okay.
Cool. Let's talk about your wait times contention. So are your links dependent on the fact that you're going to lower reimbursement rates to Medicare rates?
So the hospital's link is, but the doctor's not necessarily. That's why they're two separate links.
Why doctors not necessarily?
Yeah, because basically under Medicare for All, the fee schedule changes. They're paid in different increments that are oftentimes lower because Medicare rates, like, are
based on Medicare rates.
I mean, I suppose, but there's also, like, it's not necessarily, like, always. Yeah, that's over time. So we'll say sure.
Okay. I don't think I need prep unless Emily wants to tell me anything. No?
No.
Okay, I guess not. Then I'll just start. It's gonna go straight to their case. Is everyone ready? Time begins now. On the observation, first of all, the evidence itself says that it should not be used as evidence that insurance doesn't decrease mortality, but second of all, it concedes that the study was only conducted over a 10-year period, while real effects may take longer to appear. You ignore the observation. On contention about wait times. First, on hospital closures, turn it with our case, because global budgeting means that all hospitals have the resources they need, and all resources have the hospitals they need, and Medicare for All solves for any uncompensated care. This is basically a turn because PC continues that under Medicare for All, rural hospitals would no longer face financial ruin due to low admission rates. You prefer rural healthcare on access on severity because Warsaw 19 finds that rural Americans have the worst access to care in the U.S. compared to urban and suburban residents. But second, turn it again because the quality actually improves under Medicare for All. Tarlow writes that Turlo writes that quality improves under Medicare for all because the provider won't be wasting time trying to figure out billing for hundreds of different payers. Thus, the provider would be able to spend more of their time on providing care, but delink them because they have no impact. Tarlo continues that Medicare for all gradually decreases any reimbursement rates and makes any financing adjustments if necessary to help hospitals. Indeed, Stein finds that Medicare for all will be slowly phased over a course of 4 years, allowing hospitals to adapt to any new funding mechanisms. But let's go into doctor shortages. 4 reasons why doctors don't see their salary decrease basically at all when you affirm. First is administrative burdens. Scott 18 writes that the average U.S. physician spends $83,000 a year dealing with insurance plans, but under a single payer plan, this doesn't happen. Second is alternatives. Stein continues that even if Medicare for all reimbursement rates would be lower than private insurers, many providers rely on other forms of insurance such as Medicaid, and they would be seeing their reimbursement rates actually go up. But third is malpractice. Scott continues that a single payer system would ensure that all patients be covered for the rest of their lives, and as a result, malpractice coverage would be dramatically lower, saving doctors money, so their net income would be higher. But fourth is gradual changes. Stein furthers that Medicare for all wouldn't immediately just change the entire healthcare industry. They slowly phase in, giving hospitals and doctors time to adjust to any new spending changes. Overall, Paris concludes that under Medicare for all, the average physician's income would not decrease. But on contention 2 about recipient countries, first on supplement A about Biotech, on their uniqueness evidence about Jarvis is very bad. First of all, it has no warrant, but second of all, it concedes that even at our most productive, less than 50% of drugs created are actually innovative. It is not the status quo is not that great. But then turn them, because the evidence also concedes that in the status quo, pharmaceutical innovation focuses largely on drugs for orphan diseases because they're cheaper to create than primary care treatments. Prefer value-based pricing here, because by shifting the focus from production to innovation, companies are forced to diversify the kinds of drugs they make in order to bring in revenue. But turn it again, because the Jarvis evidence further concedes that due to industry consolidation, the capability of producing new drugs in the long term is going to go down, which means the status quo in the long term decreases innovation. The implication is that you prefer VBCs because first, we're the only side with risk consultancy, but second of all, VBCs reduce that consolidation. And Brecky explains that price controls reduce monopoly market share by 37%, giving small companies a fighting chance through innovation. But yeah, and you can also turn this argument with value-based pricing. But again, it's non-unique because the Wall Street Journal finds that Trump has signed an executive order reducing drug prices, meaning investor confidence is already going down in the status quo. But finally, even if you believe investor confidence goes down under Medicare for all, they aren't the majority of capital flow to small pharma anyways, because Robinson 20 writes that the dominant trend in the pharmaceutical industry is big pharmaceutical companies now partnering and investing into small biotech companies because they want to use these small startups to gain access to discoveries. Robinson continues that if investor confidence went down, big pharma would fill the gap. But then onto their second supplement about subsidizing prices in low-income countries, you can delink the argument because pharma companies are always going to continue selling drugs to those places with low prices for 2 reasons. First is profits. Lichtenberg 11 finds that drug companies charge lower prices to poor countries because low-income consumers have higher price elasticity, meaning that if the price increases, they can't afford drugs, so their consumption decreases, thus lowering revenue. And second is market power. Huber 17 writes that U.S. pharma keeps prices low internationally because if other countries don't like the prices charged for medicine, they'll just ignore the U.S. drug patent and seek alternative generics elsewhere, depriving the company of all of their market share. You buy this response for 2 reasons. First, we link it to their warranting about wanting to maximize profit better, but second, our response is empirically proven because Pharmaphile 15 notes that due to regulatory pressures, pharma companies have shifted toward low-income economies to reap the best profits. But you can turn them because empirically, when domestic profits have fallen for pharma companies, they shift to increasing accessibility in the developing world. During the 2008 recession, to increase revenue, Wayne 9 finds that pharma companies increased the number of people receiving treatment in Africa by 77%.
Can we call for some evidence? Can we see like the intake we read on our observation?
Yeah, can we all see
the insight on your observation? It's in your own evidence.
Like, I mean, if you could point that out because it's just not.
Yeah, same thing with the Jarvis evidence. Could you actually send the bit that says that like all innovation is going to fail in the future?
Okay, cool. Emily, can you send them the Jarvis evidence and I'll pull up the observation?
Yeah, that sounds good.
A question on the observation evidence. Do you all have a full PDF? Because the link takes me to like a site that doesn't let me access the full
yeah, I'm pretty sure. Hold on. Let me pull it up.
Cool.
Sorry that
No, it's all right.
Is it like, yeah, it's probably just paywall. Let me pull it up.
Mm-hmm.
downloading the PDF right now. And I'll
All right.
send it to y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry that was paywalled. I didn't know.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, I will bump that. Okay, I just sent it.
I'm still waiting for it to come through. I'll let you know when I get it. Okay, I got it.
I sent Jarvis. Are you guys running prep?
We're calling for evidence.
Let me know if you didn't receive it.
Okay. I think I just got it. So I'm gonna get my time. All right, we'll start prep time now.
I also sent the invite.
Can we see like the last response? It was like during the 08 recession, like profits went up or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, I got it. So we'll start prep time. Why did you get the prep time for that?
I had it like
one.
running the whole time, so
I had like one, maybe 40 because like I had it running the whole time too, but like obviously it took time.
yeah. So yeah, probably like 130, 140.
Yeah. We're just gonna start on our case and then go to their case.
Sorry, did you want to see the evidence? Because I'm sending it over. It was 2 cards. Did you want to see that beforehand or?
That would actually be good, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Wayne and Cohen. So I sent them over.
Yep, we'll start prep when we get it. I'll let you know when I get it, by the way. It still hasn't come in for me.
Okay, yeah, Gmail can be a little slow.
Okay, I just got it. Grace, did you get it too?
Yeah, so we'll start
Right.
prep. Okay, that's okay, that's fine. All right.
We've taken like minute 55 total, or sorry, minute 45.
Yeah. So like once again, just gonna start on our case, then go to their case. Okay. Start on.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah, she wants to make sure she can hear.
Okay, just let me know whenever.
Sorry, my bad.
Can everyone hear me? Is everything fine? Okay. Just like our case, your case again. Start on our case. On our first contention, they read you this turn about global budgeting, but what we tell you is that global budgeting is really bad because logically, if you think about it, if there's a huge influx of patients and not enough doctors in order to meet that demand, then obviously this is going to lead to shortages and wait lists. That's infinite wait times for people. But then they say that they're like increasing quality because they don't waste time on paperwork. Wasting a few extra minutes on paperwork is not the same as quitting your job altogether, meaning that no one gets quality care whatsoever. Then you can group all these terms about why doctors basically like make more under Medicare for all because none of them matter. FTI finds that the perception is that American physicians.
I couldn't hear her rebuttal. I'm really sorry about this. But
No, you're good.
I'm actually so sorry about this because Evelyn told me to put on my headphones, but then your voice wasn't coming through because they're Bluetooth connected and they do that sometimes. I'm really sorry about that. Do you mind starting over your rebuttal?
It's fine.
Great.
You can hear me now, though, right?
Say that one more time.
You can hear me, right?
I can hear you now. I was wearing my headphones before and your voice wasn't coming.
Okay, so.
My bad. Yeah.
Okay. Start with our first contention. They read you this turn about global budgeting, but what I would tell you is that logically, if you think about it, if there's a huge influx of people and the same supply of doctors, obviously there's going to be shortages, wait lists, no one's really going to get care. But then go down to when they say that they're going to increase quality because doctors don't have administrative paperwork. Like a few extra papers at night doesn't mean that you're going to quit your job altogether. The real link into quitting your job is a decreased income, which leads me down to like there are 4 warrants as to why doctors actually make more money. I would actually say that none of these are true because FTI finds that American physicians enter the workforce with an average student debt of $200,000. These factors would be amplified under Medicare for all, discouraging the next generation from entering the practice of medicine. That means even if profits do go down, the perception is that they're going to make less money, meaning that in the long term there's going to be less doctors. Then go down to like our second contention. They try to indict Jarvis. Literally, call for Jarvis is so much better than this evidence. It evaluates a time frame over like 10 different years of like multiple different companies. Is a lot better than this. But then they say that like they're more focused on orphan disease focused, and like different investors are going to invest into these. But we say specifically for small pharma biotech, they need like for value-based pricing, it would be way worse, and I'll get to that on their case. Then they say that like again they try to indict Jarvis once again, but he says that there's actually been a steady increase in the in the amount of innovation over the years. Call for the evidence is actually really good. They say that Trump did price controls, but these price controls literally had no impact. They didn't do anything. That's why they can never implicate what impact they had on the pharmaceutical industry. But then they say that like not the majority of like investors, but we say venture capitalists are like funding the majority of small pharma. On our second link, like you pretty much group all the responses together because by definition, Medicare for all is going to decrease profits. That's going to like take out of business all the pharma companies, meaning that like they need high prices in order to subsidize the developing world. On their turn about the 2008 recession, their card is really bad. It never indicates what the correlation is between these two, and they talk about like a lot of other factors in it. You should call for it. It's really unspecific. But then on their case, on access, firstly, I would say this is non-unique because healthcare costs are declining right now. That's because Becker's Hospital Review a couple weeks ago says that 24 new entrants will develop new ways to engage consumers at a lower cost than traditional healthcare. Secondly, secondly, turn, they cause shortages by creating wait lists, which hurts the uninsured the most. Halesmeyer says that patients view medical care as free good, resulting in unlimited consumer demand. The result is shortages in the form of waiting lists. These wait times are terrible, as Emmanuel says. That constrained supply also promotes gaming system and inequality. When technology is limited, patients try to jump the queue. Such gaming favors well-off patients. That means that at the end of the day, they're only benefiting the rich people even more. But then on their second contention of global budgets, firstly, turn because global budgeting encourages rationing, which is worsening financial strain. Bernson says that hospitals under global budgeting can operate within their budgets by limiting spending, even if the spending reduction approach might negatively affect access and quality. Empirically, Jacobs finds that the global budget payments in Britain resulted in severe financial strains for the country, with tens of thousands of operations canceled, even for emergency care. But secondly, turn because both rate cut and global budgeting decrease as funding is going to be the same as current medical rates. And FTI finds that medical reimbursement rates for physicians were 75% of private insurance reimbursements, and they quantify a nation loss of 44,000 physicians. You're going to prefer this over their 128% card because it's more recent and it interacts with private insurance reimbursement rates and what they would make like in the new world. But then on their third contention about innovation, firstly, turn because value-based pricing is really bad. It wastes millions of dollars on marketing and studies. Lamatia says that scientists will exhaustively build their case for their compound in order to convince the company to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to prove this to the clinic. After making such a commitment, they'll begin touting the drug along studies. But despite this, these studies will fail. This means that no one's going to invest into good drugs. They're actually just going to invest even more into marketing in order to make their drugs seem like they're high value. But then secondly, turn because price controls discourages innovation. Pipe says that price controls would discourage drug development. It costs $2.9 billion to bring a new drug to the market, and pharmaceutical companies won't plow huge sums of R&D if it's impossible to make a profit. In fact, a single breakthrough medicine combined could save the healthcare more money than all price controls combined. You're always gonna prefer this. Their own 73% evidence concludes that this was a result of pharmaceutical companies, not the government. But then thirdly, we would turn this argument because the value-based pricing mechanism would create delays and store shortages. Keckley says that evaluating value metric performance could delay the release of new pharmaceuticals. Adverse selection could occur if pharma companies are reluctant to enter the value-based pricing agreements. This is really bad because Spiegel elaborates that this delay can be really bad for colon cancer patients and cause 600,000 European deaths. That's a huge impact. We outweigh on probability because we give you empirics. The US is doing good innovation right now. The system is not broken. Don't try to fix it.
Maria Renson.
Can I see the evidence that like the perception that physician incomes go down deters incoming doctors?
Yeah.
Emily, is there anything you wanted to see?
Yeah, the one that talks about how like the drug saves more money or lives than like access does.
Yeah. Okay, I sent both of those.
Still waiting on it. I'll let you know when I get it. Okay, I got it. And we'll run prep when we start looking at it. Okay, we can start cross.
I got like 2 minutes, 35 seconds of prep there. I don't know if you guys were.
In total, I got 2 minutes 11 because it took us a few moments to get connected
Oh,
after.
Sure.
Yeah, I have 2:11. But
It's fine. My headphones are glitching again.
yeah, okay. Can I have first question?
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about your case, right? Why do you think doctors immediately, like prospective doctors immediately assume that their incomes are going to go down?
For sure. Okay, so basically when you enter medical school, you know that you're gonna have a student debt of like at least like $200,000. So immediately you're like, oh, like that's a lot of money. But then you're like, well, when I become a doctor, at least I'll make like money where the gains would offset like any potential losses. But when they think of Medicare for all, like there's a survey, most doctors perceive it as if, even if it's not true, they perceive it as they'll make less money, which means that ultimately they think like the losses are going to outweigh the gains, and they decide not to become doctors and like to pursue a different career. Okay, so
Sure.
on your case, if they're like plowing even more money into marketing, like millions of dollars, how are these companies going to be able to like pour any more investment into R&D?
Right. So marketing isn't allowed under Medicare for all. So that response actually isn't responsible.
I understand that marketing technically is banned, but the truth is that in order to like appeal to a panel the value of your drug, which by definition what value-based pricing is, you have to like basically convey your case, and by doing that, that's when they pour millions of dollars into studies which they just like say they can't like market to the public, but they can still market to the government, which is lobbying.
Okay, so the government has an independent, like under value-based pricing, the government has an independent commission that decides the value of a drug based on like a variety of factors. So what makes you think this commission is susceptible to studies if they know that big pharma actually wants to just convince, if their like motive is to convince them that the
Okay,
drug
so
is
for
innovative?
example, like if Wyatt and I are both trying to appeal like our own drug to a panel of government people, we need to find ways that's going to make our drug seem more appealing to them. So I'm going to perform like a study showing that this many people improve their conditions by this amount in order to prove the effectiveness of my drug. But that study is going to cost me a lot of money because that's going to like obviously like to get the data to get participants, that's going to like cost millions of dollars.
Yeah, the point is the government looks at like it takes data itself. Can I have a question?
The government, like if that was true, the government would still be spending billions of dollars to make studies for every single drug to determine its value. So sure.
They don't make okay. We have so our Keckley evidence says that like the government looks at like you can't I don't understand how they can just make their drug seem more appealing, because you look at like what goes into the drug, right? And then they look at like what kind of disease it cures, how it affects patients. And so even right, so the bottom line is though, like if a company creates something that's totally clinically useless, the government's still going to be able to see that, right?
Right. Okay. So like for example, like both like Vyvanse, Adderall are both probably effective for ADHD, right? But if they had to choose between the two different ones, they'd probably have to perform a set of clinical trials and different studies in order to determine which one on net is more effective, because like in order to find the most effective drug.
What does that have to do with like?
Even though they are both like, technically deemed like effective, right? The government still has to choose between different drugs and like which ones are more profitable, which goes beyond the baseline of like, oh, this is a good thing. They have to go deeper and figure out like the actual implications of that.
Yeah, because of you have to choose between certain drugs, then everyone wants to make like a more innovative drug instead of clinically similar drugs.
They end up at the end of the day spending even more money on like just trying to appeal their drug to make a profit than actually making good innovative drugs.
Okay.
That's
Also, yeah, this is not cross, but before we run prep for summary, I was just curious if you had evidence on the fact that, you know, they would pursue just similar drugs and then try to convince the government that it's useful instead of like innovating in the first place. If you had any.
It's an analytic. I can explain it.
It's not.
Okay.
Well, actually, the Lamontia evidence is like pretty good.
Right, I read it. It's not an analytic. I can send you the evidence.
That's true.
Okay. Yes, please. Thank you.
Part of the implication comes from us, though.
No, it's like all in the evidence, but like either way, it's still true.
Okay. Thank you. Have you sent the evidence?
Yeah, I sent it.
Okay. We're gonna run prep when we look at it, and we'll probably just keep running it. All right. Emily, are you ready?
Okay, yeah. Let me pull up my timer. It's just gonna be our case, their case. Yeah. Okay. Start off on the turn on access. It's just a turn about wait times. We'll get to it when we get to their case. Then on rural hospitals, they say that global budgets are really bad, but they're misunderstanding what global budgets are because it's a monthly lump sum payment, which there won't be like any rationing effects because the leftover funds from doctors that have a lot of leftover funds, these are like urban hospitals, will end up going to the ones in rural hospitals, which means that there's always a balance out. There's not going to be any rationing. Then on the fact that like they say that Medicare rates are going to be really low. Number one, our evidence says that it increases by 124%. And second, we would say there's actually going to be global budget, so it doesn't even apply. Now, the way we're winning this round is on our third contention on innovation. We tell you that 90% of the drugs in the status quo are Me Too drugs. They try to cite their Jarvis evidence. I'll explain why it's really bad on their case. You should really call for that. Then, we explain that Medicare for All is going to solve this problem with value-based pricing, specifically because Kegley says that it changes the incentive framing, which means that these companies now actually have to innovate rather than trying to price their drugs based on production. That's really important because real innovation has increased life expectancy by 73% and will save 10 million lives every year by 2035. They give you two responses. The first is that scientists are going to waste money to prove its innovation. Number one, we say it's going to be an internal government commission. Number two, there's not going to be any marketing allowed. Number three, the way you're going to actually see value-based pricing being implemented is very, very explicit in the Kegley card, you can call it. There's a lot of, like, it specifically lays out how you're going to actually value-based or price these drugs. Then they tell you that, like, there's like that value-based pricing is going to actually decrease like a lot of the innovation, but we tell you that that's actually not true. What we say is that under value-based pricing, small businesses actually end up doing better, specifically because they have more of a chance to compete because they can actually, because they do most of the innovation, which means that they have a better chance under value-based pricing to not be like swallowed up by big pharma. Then they tell you there's going to be delays. This is simply false. Number one, they say that like pharma companies are going to be reluctant to enter in agreements. We say there's like patent killing, which is a like leverage the government has that the pharma companies can't refuse. Then second, on the 600,000 deaths, this only happened because the companies had to negotiate with every single EU country. But in the US, it's only going to be one actor. There's none of that. Then on their case, first they drop the observation, so you can't go off of that. Then on global budgeting specifically, they tell you that like there's like doctors are going to end up, there's going to be decrease in doctors because of an increase in access, which is the wait times. But number one, doesn't respond to admin work. We say that specifically this takes up a majority of the doctor work. That means that even if you increase access, there's going to be less admin times, which means that ultimately doctors end up having enough time to work. That second, they also extend the D-link about global budgeting, which they drop on their case. Then let's go down to their second contention. On the Jarvis evidence, it's really bad because it tells you that in the long term, there's not going to be any sort of innovation whatsoever because of industry consolidation, but VBC solve because it decreases monopolies by 37%. That's what Everson says you can call for it. Then they also don't respond to the fact that big pharma is actually going to end up filling the investment gap if venture capital leave, and that it only makes up 2% of the actual investment in small companies. And finally, on prices, they completely drop the fact that even if companies are going to lower prices in the developing world or raise prices in the developing world, it's going to be covered by generic manufacturers that ignore the patent.
We'll take
Okay, we'll run prep.
We have like
We've got a minute 15. We're out of prep. It's going to start on our case. Actually, just real quick, it's going to be like their first two contentions, and then it'll be our case. Okay. Everyone good? Their first two contentions, don't let them go for this. We both agree that the most important impacts are these recipient countries. They don't extend a link or an impact on either of these. Neither of us are going for our wait time / access contentions. With that, going to our case, we tell you, Jarvis tells you that U.S. innovation is thriving right now, and Robinson tells you that small pharma is doing 63% of that innovation. Unfortunately, they are really reliant on investment, and so if profits go down, there will be less investment. What's really important is the Dickinson 94 evidence that tells you that empirically, when investors fled, biotech offerings fell by almost half. So even if like these big pharma companies like will swallow them up, you always look to the empiric first. The empiric disproves that clearly these venture capitalists are super important in terms of investment. They ignore our BIO evidence too, that it says that they're almost solely reliant on venture capitalists. They never really explain why like big pharma swallowing them up matters either. Don't consider this at all. But most importantly, on the Jarvis evidence, they say that like the long term there will be no innovation, but recognize that what they are looking at is like this one dude that Jarvis like talks about that says that this is bad. Jarvis concludes the other way. Jarvis concludes that innovation is super good in the status quo, and that it is not going to end up getting worse in our world. There's just like this one person that he cites, but then he actually just goes the other way. They're really like not interpreting this evidence correctly. At that point, recognize that uniqueness controls the direction of the link. We should not be changing the status quo if it is good right now. Recognize they literally read status quo impacts. They read the Sun evidence that we read, and the Nushka evidence doesn't even say that value-based pricing will change any of this. If both of their impacts are in the status quo, so you're always going to prefer you want to prefer the status quo outweighing on probability, because we know in the status quo we're increasing life expectancy by 73%. You don't want to fix a system that isn't broken, but recognize that if venture capitalists flee, which they will empirically, that leads to new drugs going down 75%, severely lowering access for these people in these recipient countries and making it so that we are decreasing life in their world. Always prefer us on probability. We don't actually know necessarily what is going to happen in our world. Always prefer us or prefer the status quo. But on their case, what's really important is the Lamontia term that we tell you about marketing. They say 3 responses. First off, they say that's a government commission. Second, they say that it's like literally not allowed. And third, that it's like pretty explicit rules. Let me explain what the turn is. Basically, even if like it doesn't actually help them, these companies still want to basically they put a ton of money into studies. That is not specifically marketing to the government. It is more like these really like bad studies that basically just show that their drug is better. So it's not actually explicitly marketing. It's just putting more money into things that will make their drug look better. That means that money is actually going away from innovation. So they won't actually do any more innovation with value-based pricing. Even if it's a government commission, they still want to make themselves look good. And that's why they put all this wasteful money into basically like marketing their drug, like de facto marketing their drug. And so ultimately that means that there is actually no risk of innovation actually going up in their world, because they will be spending no more extra money on marketing. They like making a new drug, as Pipes tells you, is super expensive. And so they don't want to actually make like new innovative drugs. They just want to stick to what they do, but make them look more appealing. At that point, there is no offense in their world. They literally read impacts that conclude our way. You always prefer us on uniqueness. You always prefer us on the status quo because we are outweighing on probability. We don't know what's going to happen on their world, in their world. Vote neg.
Ready for green toss?
Yep.
Okay. Let me pull up my timer. Just give me a second, sorry. Okay, cool, I'm ready.
We can discuss the Jarvis evidence. So, like, what does it say even in like the first paragraph of the article, which is like right underneath where it says that currently there's like 42% of like first-class drugs.
It says, yet another encouraging trend was the influx of innovative therapies for underserved diseases. That is the next paragraph. You basically are cherry picking this one instance where hold on, let me pull up the evidence in the email chain. But basically, like this Kirsch dude who concludes the other way from Jarvis. Jarvis says that innovation is good right now, and that like we are like basically we're just saying that we prove uniqueness, that it's good right now, and that like there's no reason why it's going to change in the future.
I'll explain. The first paragraph says that like even though in the status quo it seems like these drugs are going up, I can read directly from the card that it specifically masks troubling indications about the health of the industry. That's what the first paragraph says, and they refer back to it at the end.
It says some analysts caution. That's not what Jarvis actually says. He says that, okay, this is like the alternate claim.
I mean, I can go back to the very bottom and then have his own conclusion again.
Okay, wait. When you write like a study or like an article, you usually interact other points of view. That's what Jarvis is doing. He's like interacting with other people who have concluded the opposite, and that's why in the end of the day he concludes that actually innovation in the U.S. is thriving and is on the upward trend. He's evaluated like the last 10 years.
No, so
I
would say
Yeah, he takes into account the past. He says it's going up right now, but then he cites someone else that says it's probably not going to go on for much longer. It's going to decrease in the long term due to industry consolidation. He does not make any projections.
I think that we should just call the evidence. You can have a question.
Okay, so like your link into your C3 is that like companies are spending more on like good innovation, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can have a question.
Oh, okay, sure. So what's the reason why innovation is gonna go down?
Yeah, so we'd say there. Oh, like in your world with value-based pricing?
No, in your world.
There is no reason that innovation is going to go down because it's good right now. And biotech, or sorry, if price controls are implemented, basically we tell you that investors flee from biotech. We see this empirically, and biotech does most of the work.
3 pieces of defense. Like we specifically said in our summary and rebuttal that venture cap only makes up 2% of like all the like investment that goes into it.
But we tell you it's the most important, right?
Why is it the most important? There's never been a warrant as to why it's the most important. Like we would say that venture cap is only like 2%. So even if that disappears, you
maybe
have a lot of other.
Okay, maybe venture capitalists are like 2% of the whole industry, but we're talking specifically about small biotech. That makes up majority of venture capitalists, which is the most important for creating new drugs.
Yeah, I think you prefer the BIO evidence that tells you that they're heavily reliant on investment and on prices staying high. And I think you always, oh, is that cross? Okay.
You're good.
My bad. I wasn't timing it. I'm pretty sure y'all are out of prep.
All right, so it's going to go our case, their case, and then weighing at the end. Is everyone ready? time begins now. Let's start on our case. The thesis of our argument is that right now in the status quo, there is no innovation going on. Big Pharma is gaming the system. Light of Stanford finds that 85 to 90% of drugs are clinically useless, which is why value-based pricing forces big pharmaceutical companies to align their incentives with that of patients, because their drugs actually need to be innovative in order for them to make a profit. They extend one term saying that companies are going to put money into studies to make themselves look good. First of all, remember we tell you that the Internal Government Commission has judgment of its own. But second of all, their evidence, like the term they use for the evidence they use for their term, assumes that nobody can decide how value-based pricing works. They assume that it's very subjective. But our Keckley evidence outlines exactly what value metrics are going to be used under value-based pricing. You cannot vote off this term. But then they tell you that big companies aren't going to want to innovate because they have less revenue. But in our world, it's that they are guaranteed not to have any revenue if they do not produce innovative drugs. And we also tell you that in our world, small businesses actually do better under value-based pricing, because if they're so important and do so much innovation, then they're actually going to get a profit from value-based pricing. With that, let's go into their case. First, on this Jarvis evidence. They never make Jarvis interact with light. You're going to prefer light because Jarvis concedes that in the future innovation is going to go down. But then so because it concedes innovation is going to go down because of the status quo, you can also turn their arguments and we can link into their impacts, because affirming helps small businesses by giving them a fighting chance through actually innovating without being like bought out by big companies. Why it says that the Jarvis evidence is good? Because it says innovation is good right now. Sure, even if you believe it's good right now, it does not make any projections about the future. But then they extend low-income countries without actually responding to the defense Emily extends that says big pharma is never going to make prices higher in low-income countries, because they'll just go buy generics and they're going to lose all profits. But actually, we're going to be the ones linking into the developing world, because innovation affects everyone. If you do not have innovation in their world in the long term, without any innovation, there's no access to life-saving drugs anywhere. That's why it's very clean ballot for the affirmative.
All right. I don't think we have prep time, right? Okay, so it's just gonna be like their case and our case. Is everyone ready? Okay. All right. Start on their case. They lose the entire round when they read an impact that concludes for our side. Their impact literally says that right now, innovation is allowing for life expectancy in the global south to go up by 73%. That's why we read the same impact. They really mess up here. That proves the status quo is not broken. Don't try to take the risk of fixing something that's actually really good. But then go down to their actual case. Extend the Lamatia term, which tells you that in reality, when value-based pricing happens, they end up spending way more money, millions of dollars on studies in order to prove the value of their drug to people. They say that the government can judge on their own, but in order to judge, they need to actually have enough difference in the studies. That's why people do studies, that the government can judge for their own side. They say that this assumes that it's a subjective thing. No, it doesn't. That's just, they're literally just making this up. Our evidence literally talks about how value-based pricing would be implemented under Medicare for all. But then they say that our world guarantees no revenue, but that's not true, because they pretty much ignore Pipes, who tells you that one breakthrough drug in our world would actually save a lot, would actually make much more money than all the price controls combined, and then it's a lot more profitable right now. You can literally just look to their impact if you're not sure where to look there. But then on our case, our story is that Jarvis 2020 tells you that U.S. innovation right now is thriving. Robinson says that small pharma is doing 63% of real innovation, and that this small pharma specifically is really having a venture capitalist investment. However, if Medicare for all were to come in and implement price controls, these venture capitalists would completely pull out, crippling the industry, causing new drugs to go down by 75%, which is really bad, because Sun tells you that right now U.S. innovation is allowing for the life expectancy in the global south to go up by 73%. We all agree on this. That's terrible if you pull this out and don't allow this to happen. They make a few responses. They just basically say that that our evidence doesn't say the future will be good. First of all, yes, it does. It literally says that that it's on an upward trend and will likely obviously continue this way. There's no reason for a dip. But then secondly, we would say that in their world, you can literally just look to our turn on value-based pricing. It's only going to get worse when they pour even more money into things like marketing and lobbying towards the government. They say that big pharma. They talk about big pharma and generics. This evidence is from 2006. First of all, ours post-dates. But moreover, you need small pharma. You need venture capital specifically for the small biotech industry, which is reliant on the venture capitalists. The status quo is good. Don't break something that's not actually good.
Good round.
Good round.
Good round.
This was probably the most interactive innovation debate we've had thus far.
Yeah, it was definitely a really great round.
Is the evidence you all are reading the upward trend and going to continue that way innovation thing the Jarvis evidence?
Yeah. You want me to actually send it's in our case, but if you want me to actually send the
I can also send like
Specifically.
Somebody already send it in the email chain.
Yeah, they send one part, but I can send like the part that we read.
Sure, yeah, that would be helpful.
I can also give more context for the part that we sent if you need it.
Sure, that's fine.
Do you guys only want the evidence on consolidation, or do you also want it on the orphan drugs?
Probably just the like consolidation.